Faced with barbarians at his doorstep, usurpers on the frontiers, and rebellious subjects in Rome itself, the 3rd century Emperor Aurelian had turned to the soldier's own god for help and restored and reunited the broken empire. But before his work could take root, he was assassinated, leaving the empire at risk once again. Now the Roman Empire lay in peril. Many rulers vied for power. From this chaos, one man emerged, eliminating his rivals and uniting the empire under the sign of a new god. His name was Constantine, and he would stop at nothing to save a dying empire. Third century Rome was racked by internal strife and barbarian invasions. But in 295 AD, a powerful new emperor emerged as the empire's savior. His name was Diocletian.
What Diocletian has chosen to do addresses a number of the concerns and a number of the challenges the empire faced in the 3rd century. One element that Diocletian brings in is a redefinition of the way frontiers were to be defended.
Emperor Diocletian created a mobile imperial army, always available to send reinforcements to the vulnerable frontier. One of his most capable lieutenants was Constantine, only 17 years old.
He was a distinguished soldier. That is to say that he was very courageous in battle and that he performed all sorts of feats of daring do.
These early signs of greatness in Constantine did not escape the notice of the emperor. Diocletian kept the young soldier close at hand, grooming Constantine for a position of power within the empire. Diocletian's other major reform was to divide the empire between 4 co-emperors, one based in Illyricum, one in Italy, while Constantine's own father ruled from Gaul. Diocletian himself governed from Nicomedia in Asia Minor. But Diocletian knew how easily his chosen co-emperors could turn on him. To prevent this, he kept their sons, including Constantine, in his court, where they trained as soldiers and statesmen under his watchful eye.
Constantine was sent off to the court of Diocletian to obtain the proper education for a member of the upper class, a literary education, philosophical education. He learned Greek, which he wouldn't have known, but most important, he had a military education.
But Constantine's life in court was anything but comfortable. For as a father figure and an emperor, Diocletian ruled with an iron fist.
He begins to rule increasingly by issuing a whole series of extremely heavily moralizing edicts, telling people what to do, telling them how to be better citizens, and so forth.
Diocletian insisted that everyone at court, including Constantine, make regular sacrifices. For above all, Diocletian believed unity in the empire came from appeasing Rome's gods. But another religion was gathering many converts, putting Diocletian's plans at risk. Its followers worshipped someone they called the Son of God, Jesus Christ.
The church had not only grown numerically, but it had also grown quite wealthy. It had come to control large buildings. It was, in many ways, a thriving institution within the Roman Empire.
An institution that Diocletian believed was a threat to Rome.
He was extremely concerned that the health of the state and the health of Rome itself was tied up with Roman religion. And Christians were a threat to that. Christians who had been tolerated for nearly 40 years were clearly a large percentage of the population in the big cities, and it's clear that there were Christians in the army and there were Christians in the imperial court.
Diocletian began his purge in his own imperial army, where he required all soldiers to sacrifice to the gods of Rome. Many Christians refused.
Diocletian believed that anything that interfered with the cultivation of Rome's protecting gods was a genuine threat to the state and could destroy the state from within. This is the way he looked upon Christians in the army.
Punishment for rejecting the emperor's edict was death, a brutal measure that Constantine, as a soldier in Diocletian's army, would have witnessed. Constantine was concerned by the fear and discord born of Diocletian's reforms, and it was trouble that would soon spread. In 303 AD, Emperor Diocletian issued an edict against all Christians that became known as the Great Persecution.
As soon as the persecution edict was issued, it unleashed what is virtually a culture of administrative cruelty. Roman officials, in carrying out the edict, when they met resistance, were expected to bring the defendants to court and to torture them for evidence and try to force them to officially and publicly give up their Christianity.
The Great Persecution marked the beginning of what Christians call the era of martyrs. Any Christian who proclaimed their faith in public was put to death.
In many ways, Diocletian's persecution brought previous persecutions way farther. It's probably the closest Roman emperors came to destroy the entire system. That is probably why so many martyrs commemorated by the Christian Church are said to have suffered for Christ during Diocletian's reign.
Despite his reservations about the persecutions, Constantine had to stay on good terms with the man who would determine his future. But when Diocletian unexpectedly fell ill and was forced into retirement, Constantine was surprised to find himself shut out of the succession.
Diocletian, it seems, understood that Constantine represented something of a threat. Constantine had campaigned with Diocletian and had done a reasonably good job during these campaigns. We're told that later in his life, Diocletian actually had imprisoned Constantine in his court to prevent Constantine from going to his father's court and establishing a relationship with his father's army.
But now, with nothing left to keep him in the east, Constantine resolved to seize his destiny and finally escape Diocletian's grasp. Constantine traveled from Nicomedia to Boulogne to meet his father, who now ruled Spain, Gaul, and Britain. Constantine's father, Emperor Constantius, was old, unwell, and troubled by the long absence of his son. But in 305 AD, Constantine was finally united with his father, a man more like him in nature than Diocletian ever was.
Constantius, as far as we can tell in the West, was a good deal more relaxed in his approach to government, and he certainly found that it was quite possible to ignore some of the things that Diocletian told him to do.
Constantine found his father a more compassionate ruler, and Constantius found his son had grown into the kind of man who could one day take his place on the throne. When Emperor Diocletian retired in 305 AD, Constantine was finally released from his controlling grip and freed to join his aging father Constantius in the west. One of Rome's 4 co-emperors, Constantius ruled over Spain, Gaul, and Britain, now threatened by the barbarian Picts. In 305 AD, he and Constantine traveled from Boulogne to Britain to put down the insurrection. The Picts were a ferocious tribe from what is now Scotland. They had long plagued Roman Britain. In battle, these bloodthirsty barbarians presented a serious challenge for Constantine and his father.
These barbarian neighbors in the 4th century are much better organized than they had been in previous generations. The Roman armies faced far more difficult campaigns in Europe than they previously had.
To make matters worse, Emperor Constantius's health was in serious decline.
The ailing emperor, he clearly was sick by the time he had come with his son to face the danger of the Picti, had gone on to this campaign, is yet another indication of how serious the threat was.
With Constantius's health in doubt, it was up to Constantine to lead his father's troops and secure their allegiance in battle.
When Constantine rejoined his father in the west, Constantius made sure that he began to assume a place in the higher command echelons, that he joined the army on campaign, that the soldiers came to know him, and that he would actually have a natural place within the administration of the Western Empire. This had always been Constantius's hope for him.
By his military prowess, Constantine won the loyalty of the army. But victory could not save his father's life. Constantine would lose the father he had only just come to know.
When his father died, the army thought enough of Constantine that they immediately acclaimed him emperor. In a way, this is a natural occurrence. It was an army that knew Constantine's father, respected Constantine's father, and now knew the son as well. They understood, in a sense, what they were getting with Constantine.
In an empire where the death of a ruler frequently led to violent coups, assassination, and civil war, Constantine's succession was smooth and bloodless. But when barbarian Franks attacked Gaul in 306 AD, Constantine faced his first challenge as emperor. He marched south from Britain to meet them in battle.
The Franks clearly understood the death of Constantius was an opportunity, and an opportunity that they could take advantage of. Constantine, though, demonstrated a great capacity as a commander and beat back this initial incursion.
As a new emperor, Constantine wasted no time in stamping his authority on the army.
The emperor was expected to be in personal command of the army and was very often expected to be in command in the front rank. Constantine seems himself to have been a very capable frontline soldier. He's often seen to be leading cavalry charges in his battle. He's a very able tactician.
He was also wise and knew that to hold on to power, he had to win the trust of the populace as well. The captured Frankish leaders provided him with a perfect opportunity. Constantine paraded his barbarian captives in the streets of Trier, in modern-day Germany, to show his people that he would protect them.
Constantine's well aware that the primary objective of any emperor at this point, if he wants to gain and hold power, is to fight with barbarians. So Constantine does this in grand fashion. Constantine undertakes campaigns against the Franks, and we have evidence that he captured a couple of Frankish kings, whom he then put on display in the arena for the delight of the Gallic masses.
Ultimately, the barbarians were thrown to the beasts, sending a clear message that Constantine had no mercy for those that threatened the Roman Empire. But in 306 AD, the empire was threatened from within. A usurper named Maxentius seized power in Rome, declared himself emperor, and took control of most of Italy and North Africa. The usurper Maxentius won support by promising to cut taxes and provide free grain to the people of Rome. Like Constantine, he was the son of a former co-emperor.
Constantine was proclaimed emperor by the troops in July of 306, and Maxentius, who's sitting in Rome, is thinking, well, he's emperor, I want to be emperor too. And so what happens is at the end of 306, he's proclaimed emperor.
Maxentius's claim to the throne had little legitimacy. He had defeated, imprisoned, and eventually executed Flavius Severus, the rightful co-emperor of Italy. And soon the people of Rome would learn that his promises were nothing but lies. In 311 AD, the Romans revolted when the free grain and tax cuts were offered only to the wealthy. Many citizens now faced destitution.
Maxentius is not a popular leader. He was a particularly ruthless leader. He put down revolts very bloodily. There were rumors going around that he was seducing senators' daughters. There were problems with the grain supply. He was taxing people, which they'd never been taxed before in Italy.
The desperate uprising of Rome's oppressed masses offered an unexpected opportunity for Constantine. Hoping to save the people of Rome and expand his own reach into Italy, Constantine traveled from Gaul to Milan to strike a deal with another co-emperor, Licinius. It was a deal to consolidate power. To seal their alliance, Licinius was betrothed to Constantine's sister.
Constantine played every game in the book. He was an extremely ambitious person, and there was no avenue to power that he was going to leave open. That meant that in his early years, he was willing to do all sorts of manipulations to try to continue to climb the ladder.
Together, Licinius and Constantine tricked their co-emperors in the East into believing their intentions were only to oust Maxentius.
Constantine looks to take advantage of the situation and starts calling Maxentius an illegitimate emperor and a usurper. Constantine and his supporters justify an invasion against Maxentius as a necessary removal of a tyrant from the city of Rome.
While Licinius defended the empire's northern border from barbarian invaders, Constantine marched on Rome and laid siege to Maxentius and the imperial city. Within the walls of Rome, the devout Maxentius based his strategy on sheep entrails, interpreted for meaning by his pagan priest.
When it came time to fight a battle, Maxentius was interested in having some sort of divine protection. And he followed the procedures that any good Roman emperor would have followed in order to seek that protection.
But desperate to determine if he should wait Constantine out or face him in battle, Maxentius also sought guidance from the Sibylline prophecies.
One of the sources that Maxentius turned to were the Sibylline oracles. These were books of prophecies that were kept by Roman priestly colleges, and these priests would then investigate certain questions and pull out an oracle.
This is an oracle in which he's told that an enemy of Rome will die today. For this reason, it seems Maxentius changes his plan and makes a decision that he won't wait Constantine out. He'll go out and meet Constantine in battle.
Assuming that Constantine was the enemy of Rome referred to by the oracle, Maxentius prepared his army for battle. Just outside of Rome, Constantine prepared to meet Maxentius on the battlefield. Knowing his troops would be severely outnumbered, Constantine grew uneasy.
Constantine began to get very concerned about the strength of his forces, and we're told he prayed that some god would help him and received a vision in response. And this is interpreted by Constantine as a Christian vision.
This is how the 4th century historian Eusebius of Caesarea recorded what was supposed to have happened, as he was told it by Constantine himself. Around noontime, when the day was already beginning to decline, he saw before him in the sky the sign of a cross of light. He said it was above the sun, and it bore the inscription, "Conquer by this."
What he claims to have seen was a symbol that looked like a cross with a sort of P form at the top of it, that is the letters Chi Rho, that would have formed the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek. And there are some sources that claim that he also heard a voice at the same time that said that he would conquer by this sign.
Constantine ordered his soldiers to place the Chi Rho on their shields and standards, transforming the Christian symbol from an object of persecution to one of honor.
Constantine assumed a new god, or a god that had formerly been rejected, as his divine force, as his victory power. By taking on the Christian god, the god that had been subjected to persecution by former emperors, Constantine was therefore doing something quite revolutionary.
With his conversion, Constantine had turned his battle with the pagan Maxentius into a trial of religions. He met Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge, which, passing over the Tiber River, was the only obstacle between Constantine and Rome. Though grossly outnumbered by Maxentius, Constantine and his army, now marked by the Christian Chi Rho, rode into battle with courage.
The Battle of Milvian Bridge is a significant battle. The forces are arrayed against each other, and despite a numerical advantage, Maxentius's forces are pushed back by Constantine towards the river.
It was at the banks of the Tiber that Maxentius's fate was sealed.
Constantine forced Maxentius to give battle with the Tiber at his back. It was a terrible position to be in, and as Constantine's force pressed in on his own, Maxentius's army fell apart.
As defeat engulfed his army, Maxentius joined the rout. He attempted to swim across the Tiber and so reach Rome. But with his heavy armor weighing him down, Maxentius did not make it across the river. Days later, his bloated and deformed body was pulled from the Tiber, final proof that the usurper's regime had fallen.
Constantine has won a significant victory at Milvian Bridge that eliminates the opposition of Maxentius, and even more significantly, gives Constantine control of a full half of the empire, including the wealthy province of Italy.
Maxentius's fate was a powerful reminder of Constantine's strength and of what befell those who dared to oppose him.
Constantine went out of his way to dredge his body out just so they could parade his head through Rome and then send it to North Africa to demonstrate that this previous emperor was dead and Constantine had now taken over.
His victory over Maxentius also proved to Constantine that the Christian god was more powerful than the pagan gods of his enemy. With the death of Maxentius, all of the Western Empire belonged to Constantine. As agreed, he left the east for Licinius to take. They met in Milan, where Constantine and Licinius confirmed their treaty through marriage, as planned.
Constantine decides to bind himself to Licinius, or bind Licinius to his cause. He takes one of his half-sisters, Constantia, and marries her to Licinius, who recognizes that this is the natural way of making an alliance.
Now, to begin with, the marriage itself actually marks the point at which the two, Constantine on one hand and Licinius on the other, agreed on the policies.
One of these policies reflected Constantine's recent adoption of Christianity.
The two emperors consulted on how they would carve up power between them, and one element in this decision was to extend toleration for Christianity throughout the whole empire. Licinius was not a Christian himself, although he agreed with Constantine to stop persecution throughout the empire.
For now, such agreements came easily, but any alliance born of ambition is fragile. And Constantine recognized that his sole co-emperor was also his greatest rival. After forming an alliance with the Emperor Licinius, Constantine had defeated and killed the usurper Maxentius in Italy. Convinced that the Christian God had given him victory, Constantine was now determined to show his gratitude. For the first time in 10 years, Christians throughout the empire were able to worship freely, and for the first time ever, their faith was shared by an emperor.
Constantine had converted to Christianity. He had embraced quite seriously the task of defending the Christian church.
His family, including his son and heir, Crispus, converted as well.
Constantine not only extended toleration to the Christian church, but in the territory he controlled, he favored Christians very thoroughly.
In 313 AD, Constantine and Licinius jointly issued the Edict of Milan, recorded by the 4th century author Lactantius. We grant both to Christians and to everyone freedom to follow whatever religion they want. So whatever divinity there is in heaven may be appeased and made favorable to us and to all who are set under our power. But in the years that followed, Constantine's relationship with Licinius deteriorated. As Licinius battled his way to dominance in the east, his hunger for power grew.
So Licinius goes off and does his own thing, as it were, in the east, but Constantine doesn't trust him, and there are growing tensions between the two.
After 9 years of shared rule, both emperors coveted control of the entire empire. It was a rivalry that would drive Rome towards civil war. In the east, Christians soon bore the brunt of the emerging conflict. As supporters of the Christian Emperor Constantine, they were now seen by Licinius as a threat. They paid a heavy price.
Ultimately, one of the responses was a renewal of persecution. And the reason for that, of course, was very simple. Constantine was known to be a defender of Christians, and Christian subjects of Licinius could look like a fifth column, could look like enemies in Licinius's own territories. So he chooses to persecute them.
As churches and holy books went up in flames, so did the old alliance between Licinius and Constantine. For Constantine, now a seasoned ruler, the persecution of Christians is just the excuse he needed to attack Licinius. He quickly ordered his troops to march on his eastern rival.
Constantine was an especially effective cavalry leader. We often find himself at the head of cavalry, moving around the flanks of his enemy. He certainly does this to Licinius.
At Constantine's side was his son and heir, Crispus, who, like his father before him, proved his worth in battle. Together, they drove Licinius eastward. From Adrianople, Constantine and Crispus pursued Licinius to Byzantium and on to Chrysopolis, where he made his final stand. There, in 324 AD, with the entire empire at stake, Constantine and Crispus faced Licinius side by side.
Crispus inherited his father's ability on the battlefield. Crispus was another military genius. Without Crispus's help, the success against Licinius may never have happened.
Constantine and Crispus annihilated Licinius's army, fighting once more under the banner of the Christian God.
The Battle of Chrysopolis was really over before it began. Constantine was able to bring his own troops into the territory of Licinius without any kind of effective resistance. His own army had been victorious now easily in several battles. Licinius's own confidence seems to have been minimal.
In the final battle, victory won Constantine's sole rulership of the entire empire. Eusebius, Bishop of Caesarea, described how the eastern regions were united with those of the west, and the whole body of the Roman Empire was graced by a single and supreme ruler. Imprisoned in Nicomedia, Licinius's fate is uncertain. His beloved wife is Constantine's own sister.
His relationship with Licinius is interesting. Licinius is technically, remember, his brother-in-law. Licinius's wife pleads for mercy for her husband. For a while, Constantine seems to grant that sort of clemency. They share a meal. Licinius is sent into exile. Then he's executed.
Despite his wife's pleas, Licinius was put to death. Constantine showed no mercy, even to members of his own family. With the elimination of Licinius, Constantine now ruled the entire unified empire and intended to make his loyal son Crispus a junior emperor in the west. As co-emperor, Crispus shared in his father's plans for a new Christian capital in the east, to be located at Byzantium.
After Constantine conquered the entire empire, he wanted to create a brand new city in his own name. And he did, Constantinople. He chose a strategic location halfway between the most important frontiers, and he deliberately chose to create a new city that would have no association with his pagan predecessors. It was a city that had no rival traditions. It was a Christian city.
But even as his greatest dreams came to fruition, trouble brewed amongst those closest to Constantine's heart. His wife Fausta and son Crispus.
Crispus was the son of Constantine's first wife. His last three sons were the sons of his second wife, Fausta. And there can't help but have been some kind of tension between the two groups, especially on Fausta's side, because she would clearly want her sons to get what's coming to them, but of course Crispus is in the way.
Jealous that Crispus had been granted power in the west, Fausta was determined to secure even greater power for her sons, no matter what the cost. With his son Crispus, Constantine had defeated his last rival Licinius and finally united the empire under his new Christian faith. But Constantine's unity was soon threatened when riots began over religious differences within the Christian church.
The situation he finds among Christians in the Eastern Empire is one of great turmoil. There's a controversy raging about the nature of Christ that is also tied up with the question of who ought to have authority in the Eastern Church.
Rival bishops incited mobs to attack other Christians with opposing beliefs. It was religious violence on a scale not seen since the persecutions of 20 years before. Desperate for a resolution, Constantine demanded church officials put an end to the bloody controversy.
So he calls together a council of over 300 bishops and has them meet at a city called Nicaea. He charges them with arriving at a single definition of what Christians believe.
The result was the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that has survived more than 1,600 years and is still recited today in Christian churches around the world. We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the only begotten of the Father.
But it's a definition of Christian belief that not everyone can agree with. And this stores up a great deal of trouble for the future, because it means that rival Christians, rival Christian beliefs, are constantly jockeying for imperial favor throughout the rest of the century. And it means that emperors are regularly distracted from other business of government by trying to manage the rivalries among different Christians and different Christian bishops.
Perhaps it was this distraction that blinded Constantine to a rivalry much closer to his heart. In 326 AD, Constantine's wife Fausta attacked the integrity of his son Crispus.
Crispus was Constantine's eldest son from an early marriage, and he did not have the same mother as his half-brothers had. And it's quite clear that he was in rivalry, strong rivalry, with his three younger half-brothers.
As part of an elaborate plot, Fausta delivered shocking news, claiming that Crispus had tried to seduce her.
Things don't go very well for Crispus at all. Fausta was eager to get Crispus out of the way, so her legitimate sons could succeed without threat from Crispus.
Constantine, unable to see that it is his wife, not his son, who has betrayed him, ordered Crispus to be prepared for execution. Imprisoned in distant Pola, in modern-day Croatia, Crispus proclaimed his innocence. Though his cries fell on deaf ears, he had an advocate in Constantine's court.
Constantine received advice from his own mother, Helena, that perhaps it was Fausta herself who had engineered this little plot, had pretended to be violated or to have been set upon by Crispus in order that she, Fausta, could promote the interests of her own sons. Constantine had certainly acted too hastily and was aware of that.
When Fausta's treachery was unmasked, she paid with her life. But Constantine's realization came too late for Crispus. The prison guards had already received their orders to execute the imperial heir.
What exactly happened, we don't know. But it was a terrible blow to the Roman Empire that Crispus was sacrificed on the altar of history.
And Constantine was left only with a devastated conscience. Perhaps as a sort of penance, Constantine spent the last years of his life building churches in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Constantinople, and Rome. Among the most magnificent of these churches is one built on the site thought to be St. Peter's tomb in Rome, a place of pilgrimage for Christians to this day.
It is for his churches that Constantine is better known. That in itself is an indication both of his pro-Christian policies and of the attachment to the Christian faith.
Refusing to abandon this faith despite its ongoing disputes, Constantine directed the construction of the glorious Basilica of St. Peter himself.
It's an extraordinary explosion of architecture in a way that did not exist before in the Roman Empire. And the variety of plans could be explained both by the variety of architects that Constantine involved in this, and most likely by his own ideas. He was involved in almost every project there, and he was a man that actually had his own ideas about what's going on.
Constantine may have hoped that this devotion at the end of his life would erase a multitude of sins. For Constantine knew that his day of reckoning was not far off. Old and unwell, he was finally baptized in 337 AD.
It would make sense for Constantine to delay his baptism because emperors had a dangerous and dirty job. And sometimes they had to do difficult and sinful things as a consequence of their job. To delay baptism until the end of one's life made some sense. Those dangerous and dirty and sinful things that one had to do could be washed away before you die.
Haunted by these sins, Constantine wanted nothing more than to die with a clean conscience, purified by the waters of baptism.
By the end of his life, Constantine is something of a sort of living visionary who, at the point when he's baptized, wanted to take off his imperial robes and live ever thereafter as a sort of priest.
At the end of his life, Constantine finally found peace in the faith he had championed. He wrote, "I know that I am in the true sense blessed, that now I have been shown worthy of immortal life, that now I have received divine light." Constantine died in May 337 AD after more than 30 years of rule.
Constantine was tremendously successful as an emperor, tremendously successful as a military leader. This was a man who clawed his way into power using raw ambition. And at every turn, he used that same ambition in order to win the day.
Throughout his life, Constantine fought to keep the fragile empire whole, unified under a new religion. But not even faith could save it from the dangers ahead.